Hello, I'm Jane Murison. I am Director of Design and Research at Murison Digital. And we're a social enterprise working with partners on projects where we can do good things with technology. You might be able to spot me in this picture of the lovely people I work with. So, today I'm going to talk about AI and how we can integrate that into services, still carrying out public good. The other week, my kid was in a school show themed around AI. It was ambitious. There were kids traipsing around the canteen and playground in a sort of promenade style piece. The technology didn't quite work, and the thimble-sized boy who was playing Alan Turing dried up for important parts of the dialogue. Every single piece explained to the audience why AI was terrible. A scourge out to steal, confuse, depress, fabricate and endanger. And yes, I too can prompt Google Gemini to make rubbish pictures. In one, a cute little girl shouted for help until her mother coughed up her bank details, and then she morphed into a robot. In another, a boy started spouting extremist rhetoric, and they didn't even put on a T-bar. So I do have some sympathy. I am your friendly neighbourhood innovation grouch. I've been working in technology and new media for 20 years, and I've always been the yin to my colleagues' optimistic yangs. I'm the one that likes a rut. I prefer a pencil and notebook. I'm pretty good at making things crash. I am always the last person to get convinced when something new comes along. I do attempt to put a positive spin on this by framing myself as an ambassador from reality for my tech-forward, gadget-loving nerd friends. So obviously, my instant knee-jerk is that AI will suck. Now, we know we're not in an AI is coming phase. It's already here. It's in our products. I've seen new technology change things before. In fact, this picture doesn't do my experience justice. And the crappy face app that I used to age me did so by an insultingly small amount, so I had to mash it through again. I was working in the BBC mobile team just before the release of the first iPhone in about 2007, and I had the benefit of colleagues showing me bigger and bigger phone screens powered by better and better batteries and the newest edge of technical quality available for images and video. So I could see that there might just be a future where we would accept watching TV on a mobile device. And while we were developing the BBC iPlayer in around 2006, we carried out research into new behaviours of video watching. I met a couple of students who would do something that was totally unheard of at the time. So instead of sticking the telly on, they'd tee up YouTube videos one after the other on a laptop balanced on like an occasional table in the corner of their room. They talked about how they'd get so distracted they'd let their fish fingers burn. And the stuff that they wanted to watch, they could do that, no TV licence required. And at the time, they weren't just outliers, they were on a completely different planet. We were living in a world of totally broadcast TV. You might have a tape recorder but you did, or DVDs, but you certainly weren't doing anything on demand like that. So we did that so that we could understand what the future might look like. I know that I need to see it to understand how it might work and what could happen next. So with AI, let's say headline definition, and I'm really not getting into the details. AI is when the computer does a bit of thinking for you in order to make something, to talk to you in a vaguely human way, or to help you find some stuff. It's not really a search engine, although it can put search results into a digestible written or spoken format, like at the top of your Google results right now. And currently we can catch it out with fairly trivial stuff like maths questions because it depends on amalgamating big old piles of existing stuff rather than doing much actual thinking for itself. Commercial technology development looks for utility and usage without any particular conscience. Would it be useful for a computer to write an essay that you don't want to write? Sure. You might want to pretend that you wrote it. They might write it by stealing essays from lots of people who wrote them before. Recently, people noticed that the Chicago Sun-Times had published a list of 15 summer reads, of which only 5 were real books. And the Daily Telegraph banged out an article about a high-income family having to cut down on how many holidays they were having because their school fees were so expensive. Three of the family members were called Al, or AI, I suppose, and the other two were called Harry and Barry. Talking of not being able to add up, the timings in the article miscounted the length of time the family had been in the UK and the number of children they'd supposedly had. So I can quite happily talk doom for you, and as I'm sure that you can as well. What next? As time goes on, perhaps more and more of the internet will just be servers talking to other servers, making up stories to enrage one or other group of employees to read during their breaks from feeding more and more of the rainforest into the power stations keeping the servers running. So far, so depressing. But wait, don't go. The internet might have been conceived by idealists imagining free access to information and education for all, but that was never actually real. I find that weirdly reassuring. Moneyed interests have always been trying to influence our experience of the world. It isn't a new problem. Every time a new innovation hits the public consciousness, lots of people freak out and announce the end of society. Humans, and when I say humans I mean me, are far better at imagining the bad than the good. It's not just cliched to run to the most pessimistic conclusion, it's actively problematic. If we conclude that it's all terrible and we should avoid it at all costs, we fail to engage with it and we leave that technology to the people who really don't care about the negative outcomes. They'll play with it on their own instead. So, for those of us who've chosen to make a positive impact, we know that we can influence the outcomes. Society hasn't fallen apart yet. It does continue to evolve. Yes, there have been negative outcomes to technical advances, and legislation is historically slow to respond to those problems, but it does come. We're very recently in a time where the disposable vapes have finally been banned. People are working to measure impacts and implications and then do something about them. But rather than focusing just on trying to prevent negative impacts, there is an optimistic approach to tackling this as well. That is, find the better applications of the technology, shape it, and, apparently just mield the technology, according to Google Gemini again. We're in the privileged position of not having to think about profit first when we're conceiving our products and services, and we can prioritise impact instead. Ethical use of technologies does influence the profit-centred folk too, because if people value it, then the market will follow that. iPlayer was never going to kill YouTube, but it makes a bunch of public service content available that adheres to strict editorial standards, and it isn't trying to sell you vitamin powder or shapewear. And having that editorially good content has influenced the big streamers to compete with their own quality content. So for those of us who are trying to do good, this is a new opportunity to either find the good in AI or tweak it to be good. And the good news is, I strongly feel that I don't have to pretend to be Little Miss Sunshine to do this. I can tap into my inner grouch. For the purposes of this talk, and let's be honest, my life, I am going to try and use that inner grouch for good. Rather than deny what's natural, let's use it. So I'm going to give you a list of things that I think might be wrong with AI, and then I want us to work on how we can change that or influence them. So first of all, it's sneaky. It's used to pretend to do something pretend that you've done something that was really made by computers off the back of stolen content from creatives. Secondly, it's thirsty. It's making us use vastly more processing energy, costing the planet to generate often very trivial things. And honestly, we don't know how much, because that information is often quite obfuscated. I found a graph. I don't know what I think of it. I don't know how reliable it is, and I've seen lots of different graphs from different sources. Thirdly, it's wrong. We can all laugh at 15-fingered women modelling hand dresses, but hallucinations are undermining people's understanding of the world, and we trust it too much. If it seems to be doing such a great job, when will we notice when it screws up? That Telegraph article was actually so easy to take apart. The moment someone got past the rage bait of it all, and asked, is it actually real? But the rage bait was sufficiently distracting that people didn't for a while. There's a real risk to organisations who do get caught out as well. This is an ad that I received for a language app, and it's convinced me that the app's going to be terrible because they've made this sort of weird version of a learning model, and it's it's AI sort of yes-anding the situation like a bad improvisational actor. I don't think that the third level of a learning model ought to be learning, for example. And as people get more used to trusting that wee summary at the top of their research results, there's a lot of risk for companies providing the reliable information. First of all, like we said, people could get misled by that information, but also people might not go through and click through to the site to see the full context of that, and then that site doesn't benefit from onward journeys. So if you're a charity, that might be the services that you offer or the donations that you receive. Fourthly, it's biased. So it turns out that the giant wealth of human knowledge in the large language models are generally too white, too male, too cis, too straight and too able-bodied compared to the actual world that we live in. And on top of that, generative AI is not that hot on context, so it'll happily put a marginalised person into a Nazi uniform. They're working on these things all the time, but that continues to be an issue. It's disempowering. We're using it for the wrong things. Why would you get a computer to pretend to be creative and then leave humans to do the repetitive, boring stuff that nobody likes? So, good news. Every project needs a good challenge statement, and we've just created 5 here. Rainbows and unicorns. Let's turn our frowns upside down. So let's talk about how we can avoid it being sneaky. We decide how transparent we can be. So one of the services that we're most proud of at Reason Digital is called Is This Okay? And it was a chatbot service that was made in collaboration with Missing People and Childline to help young people and adults understand if they were at risk of being groomed into child sexual exploitation or into gang culture. What's often an irritant, like, oh God, I'm stuck talking to a computer, that actually became a genuine benefit to this experience. The chatbot introduced itself as just that, allowing young people to feel safe and to ask questions they might not be able to voice out loud to an actual person. All of this was extremely safeguarded, and we created it by co-designing with people with lived experience and sort of experienced social workers. So imagine if we could take this a step further. AI could make this conversation even more natural, and with training, read the questions better, and never wants to pretend to be anything other than a dumb robot. Confidential, neutral, and contained. Another example is a client of ours who provides translation services for the courts. Sometimes the human interpreters are actually at risk from those standing trial. They might live in quite a small community of people speaking that language, even in a large city. And actually reliable AI translation would be far safer at that point. So secondly, it shouldn't be thirsty. So, okay, I don't know how to do this yet, but the first step is to investigate. We take a sort of, a design and research-oriented process in our agency, and the first stage of that is always discovery and immersion. So, if we can get to understand this better, we need to investigate and understand the excesses of commercial AI. And that puts the cost benefit of using it within our control. This is how thirsty OpenAI says it is. So even if it's only that bad, let's not ask it to draw too many pictures of ourselves as Viking lords or action figures, and I'm sorry for this presentation. Instead, blending reusable conversation pieces or data into generated sentences only when our experiences absolutely need them and when we know it's going to create huge social impact with a person. This is another opportunity for transparency too. And if we can see how much we're spending, we can make those informed choices and even pass those on to our end users. In our team, we've assessed the carbon footprint of our software tools, and it's helped us helped us find efficiencies and make more informed choices. I still believe that we should use AI tools, but we should do so truly knowing the cost of them. We shouldn't trust it. Well, don't we all want to avoid the hard yard in some tasks some of the time? It's very attractive. However, Some of this is about making sure that the right data is in the system in the first place, and about accepting that we need to put the right checks and balances in place. We know that many of our charity clients, people like Anna Freud Centre, the King's Fund, and Diabetes UK, provide extremely trustworthy information to people. Here's an example from Anna Freud, and you can see they're talking to young people about really serious topics. So it needs to be right, both for the potentially very vulnerable people who are relying on it, but also for the charity whose reputations depend on that content being good quality. So we've been collaborating with the Anna Freud Centre to experiment with this, training AI to only use trusted data sources, to quote some text exactly where the wording itself is clinically approved. We can work with it to develop the right boundaries and use our charity partners' experience to inform and adhere to those boundaries. We can't avoid all of the hard yards, and we need to remain alert to where they still need to be in the hands of humans. So also, at Reason, we've been developing our own ideas in an initiative called Reason Labs. We're in the lucky position of having knowledge of a lot of cause areas, and we can see some of the patterns and issues that arise time and time again. One of our ideas in development is a tool for critical thinking, highlighting the outlandish claims and then actually using AI to make them even more outlandish and helping individuals to sort of test their tolerance for unreliable claims and sort of tap into their critical thinking skills. So then, it shouldn't be biased. Data sets are biased, so anything generated from the data sets are also biased. So I think, AI is maybe taking the rap for the whole body of human knowledge as represented by the internet right now. However, those same tools that help us show could potentially help us show bias rather than hiding it, and we can take the fight to the data. AI could be applied into currently biased environments for good. One such problem is self-advocacy within healthcare. For marginalised groups, it can be harder to be heard and to receive care at the doctors. A lot of us have been there. You're trying to have your pain or your problems taken seriously by someone who's very overworked and potentially dismissive as a result. We're refining an idea for an AI-powered healthcare advocate, which would help individuals plan the conversations that they want to have, take notes during the conversation, and offer prompts of questions and requests. This could have a transformative impact on the healthcare experience, uniquely possible with a transparent conversational AI tool. And it shouldn't be disempowering. So, current generative AI tools are designed to be eye-catching. Maybe they're even designed to be attractive to corporate folks who love the idea of taking the annoying creatives out of the process. However, I think these first forays into generative AI are kind of the cheap, silly versions of what is to come when truly creative people fully explore and play with these tools and incorporate them into their process. This is a case of not against, but through and with. If you get a chance, have a look at Abandoned Films on YouTube, which is a set of speculative trailers of films that have been made in a different way and in a different time. So the examples you can see on screen are sort of a Blade Runner from the 30s and a kind of crazy 80s Russian version of Fast and Furious, and then a sort of British Golden Age 1950s version of The Lord of the Rings. And you remember me talking about the early days of smartphones and streaming videos. What we were looking at were outliers, people on the edges of normal, kind of what was the mainstream of behaviour. Seeking out those sort of brilliant weirdos are the people that are going to tell us how to make the absolute best out of AI tools and what the future might hold and how we might help people to use those. There's less visible stuff too, which is a rich playground for us. We've collaborated with Age UK on their telephone befriending service for years. It's a lifetime for thousands of isolated older people in the UK, which matches trained volunteers for regular phone calls. With AI, we can audit transcripts to safeguard against sharing of personal details. It remains respectful of privacy whilst ensuring that vulnerable older people are safe. And it helps them with their administrative overhead as well. We're also collaborating with them on new opportunities to help with volunteer matching. And we're working out right now how to take some of the repetitive tasks out of processes for pet adoption. And I wish I could tell you more about that, but it's still a work in progress. So overall, I'm going to continue to be grouchy and hate change, but I've given you a few ideas about how we might be able to shape AI to make it better and to use it as the tools that it is. So key is that we tell people when we're using it, that we actually lean in and take advantage of its non-humanness, that we do our best to expose the carbon cost and use it for seeking efficiencies. We want to make sure that we are still safeguarding it, controlling the data sets that it uses, which could help with the bias as well, set rules where it mustn't improvise the answers, and accept that we do need human beings to make really important calls. But we can use it for all sorts of useful purposes, to aid critical thinking, to fight bias, to make services safer and to speed up processes. Most important thing we can do is take inspiration from what really creative people are doing with it and use that ourselves. So so I will continue to be grouchy, but I can see that AI needs us just as much as we need it. We can influence this technology and help people in the process. If you want to have some ideas together, we'd absolutely love to have a chat. We're all at different stages thinking about this, which is one of the reasons that we've spent a bit of time thinking about this internally, creating our own stance on AI, which we can share with you. But we've also developed a workshop to look at the ethics of it, what your team might be comfortable with, what are the hard lines that you don't want to cross, and the things that you do think it's worth exploring for the good of your free beneficiaries. So if you've got any thoughts already, or if you're interested in any of those things, please give us a shout. Thank you very much.